What is going on, everybody? This is the Clap Your Hands podcast, brought to you by Odyssey Sports, brought to you by Sports Radio 94 WIP. And this 1-0 series lead over the Celtics is brought to you by James Harden. Oh my God, what a game, Kyle. That was unbelievable. I mean, at one point, so I think it was 99-96 or something like that. The Sixers were minus 600 to win that game. All game, it felt like they were going to lose. My hair is not even done. I'm still doing the pod. What a night, man. What a night. It was one thing before I'll let you go. That was the game where all of a sudden it feels different. Like Embiid's ruled out. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be the same it is every year. That feeling, right? Embiid's not playing. They fall behind early. They're in Boston, and it's everything we worried about all year, all at once. Like watching it on TV, I'm thinking this is exactly what I tried to fight off all year. And even in that game, it felt like it. I can't believe they won that game, and I cannot believe James Harden did that.
I just want to say, man, all you fucking losers all year, when I told you this team was resilient and I explained why, the more athletes, PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, Paul Reed, all these guys, that they have James Harden, who's not a complete basket case like Ben Simmons is. I almost use a different word there.
I got your shot at Ben in there.
I self-censored myself. All these people said, oh, Joel's hurt. Woe is me. The sky is falling. Like, I'm the one who's supposed to be the serious and reasonable reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've had to be like the psychologist for this fan base all year.
I'll take blame for that. I'm an emotional guy.
They're now 13-5 without Joel Embiid. They just won their first game one on the road in the playoffs in like several decades. I don't know what else more people need to see. Like, this team, when they've been put in situations where their back's against the wall, they respond. They have enough guys. Like, look, we could even go within the game tonight. Tyrese Maxey, 5 fouls. Looks like he's done in the game, playing Matador defense at one point. Scores a huge bucket through Marcus Smart and one. Then gets the steal on a terrible Malcolm Brogdon pass. Puts them ahead with a layup. Like, all kinds of things go wrong for this team. But honestly, obviously, we're burying the lead here. The biggest story of the game, the biggest story of the night, that is Houston, James Harden. Like, we've talked a lot this year about, you know, he's sort of there and there were flashes of it in this. This was James Harden fucking kicking Al Horford's ass for 4 quarters. They tried to play drop coverage against James Harden, and he made 3 after 3 after 3 after 3 after 3. Like, he just canned him over this guy. And then they decide to switch against them finally on the final most important possession of the game. And James is in such a rhythm at this point. He just hits it right over this guy's head. Like, I can only imagine how Sixers fans feel right now, having watched Horford torture this team for years, torture this team, including when he was on the team. And then James just like used him as a speed bag essentially the entire night. Like, what a performance from James Harden. That's the reason they traded for him. It's why Daryl Morey has worn shirts that say like, James Harden is my personal Jesus and all this other ridiculous shit. Like, it's all because of a game like that flips the series. Now you have stolen home court advantage. The series is yours to go out there and win it.
So a couple of things. First, shout out to everybody watching live. We got all types of people in the comments. Really appreciate it. Shout out to Collie Wolf. Shout out to Christopher. Shout out to mid-major Matt, who's yelling B-ball Paul. A couple things. One, I'm so happy for Sixers fans tonight. Like, to get that win, like, this is so many years of frustration building up. And look, they didn't win the series. It feels like I'm celebrating like they did. I know they didn't. But God, man, after Embiid is ruled out, to have them win that game, it's just unbelievable. So the other thing too is, you remember when Brett Brown said after a big Jimmy Butler game, that wasn't Jimmy, that was James Butler at the podium. That wasn't James Harden. That was Uno. Like, that guy was unbelievable. Like, that's the dude that Harden's been saying he is all year. And what I really liked about it, and you tweeted this early in the game, and I think it's so true. Look, he obviously came out shooting it really well, which clearly I think let his motivation get going. He was really feeling it and all those things. But so often last year, especially against Miami, he looked like a player that had no interest in attacking the basket, that had no interest in stepping up with Embiid being out. And tonight, even when there was a bit of a stretch where he wasn't playing great, I mean, he was really good almost the entire game. But even through the stretches where it was frustrating or he didn't get calls or anything, he kept it going and he kept going to the basket. I think as good as he played, his mentality tonight, like that's why you trade for him. That's why you go out and trade for Harden, so that in these moments when you don't have Embiid, you have somebody that can step up that's been in these spots and say, I'm going to win us this game.
Yeah, he only shot 4 free throws tonight. There's obviously a
Yeah.
big foul disparity in that game, I believe. Oh, it ended up end of the game. The free throws were not
Like
that
10
big of
to
a gap,
12, there was
but
like no free throws.
yeah, I mean, what a bizarre game on that front. But I loved seeing that from Harden. Like, wash away all the made threes. Obviously, that's the biggest reason they won.
Yeah.
I just, when he plays downhill, that one layup where he probably could have dunked it, honestly. The one layup where he was like at the rim.
I thought he was
That's
going
what
to
I
dunk
want to
it. Yeah.
that's what I want to see from him. Like, that's the type of thing we've been talking about all year, right? Where James can go up like that. I know he's more susceptible to injury and might get fouled harder in a position like that, but like it's not like he's exploding and getting above
Right.
the square on the backboard. Like, it's very possible for him to do that. And I know he's not always going to have a week off leading into a game. He's not always going to get to have a little trip to Vegas to rest and recharge. And that
Hey, maybe we
storyline
should,
really got
honestly.
shot to shit after that game.
Yeah.
But look, that's the mentality he has to play with. I don't want to see the flailing and all the other stuff. Like, go downhill, force the numbers advantage. You're going to get open shots for your teammates. You're going to get opportunities to score at the rim. And okay, I just saw this pop up. I'm talking about the Horford defense of Harden on switches. Harden running pick and roll at Al Horford tonight. There's 16 direct picks. They scored 28 points on those. That's 1.75 points per possession, which is like astronomical. You score 1.75 points per possession in a game, you're obviously going to score like a record-breaking amount of points.
You're going to be a top 75 player of all time if you score at that.
You're going to be the top 1 player of all time if you score like that.
No, but sorry, continue.
But listen, all I'm saying is what we saw tonight. Yeah, he's not going to always make shots like that, but the way he was playing, getting downhill, going to the basket, going towards the rim, that's the part that can carry over. You can play like that if you're James Harden, with Embiid, without Embiid, bench units, starters, whatever it is. I know that he's playing to set guys up. He's not always going to be hunting a shot like this, but that's the thing that to me is more important than anything tonight, honestly.
Yeah. So my adrenaline's starting to come down a little bit, so we can start to maybe actually get into it. But no, I mean, I thought there was one play when you think about him tonight, and obviously it was a 3-pointers, but leading up into this series and against the Nets, a big part of our discussion was, why is he missing these layups? And is he playing well and missing layups, or is he playing, well enough? But the concern is that he's missing all these layups. Tonight, there was a moment, and it might actually be the almost dunk you're talking about, but I don't think it was, where he really shook Jaylen Brown at the top of the key and like just got by him cleanly. And he was able to get to the basket pretty much all game. And now he's done it. We talked about it all season when projecting this series, talking about what might happen also in the preview pod for this series. But against the Nets, the one thing we were concerned about was, will he be able to get past the long defenders? Mikal Bridges, Claxton when he was on him on the perimeter. And then against Boston, it was Tatum, Marcus Smart, not long, but obviously a great defender. Jaylen Brown, like they had guys that you would think that could really, if they got up on Harden, he wouldn't be able to get past. It's now been 5 games of him pretty much getting to the basket whenever he wants. And not a massive sample size, but I think to what he talked about, talking about his Achilles and saying he feels healthier than ever and he feels good to go. And it looks like that. I mean, the shooting is what it is. He's been a high percentage 3-point shooter all year. He did it in games against the Nets. But tonight, again, getting to the basket, he just looks so much healthier and so much more able to dominate than he did last year, frankly.
Yeah. And look, I have talked a lot about on this podcast about, this is a James Harden legacy playoff run, right? Like, we can talk about Embiid and he's probably about to win the MVP tomorrow night. It'll be announced and I'll probably get it on Friday. It's a lot on him in these playoffs, a lot on Doc Rivers, but like, James Harden, man, you're getting towards the end of he's certainly past his peak, but this is the end or toward the end of him being like a real impact guy. You only
Yeah.
have so many of these chances. And he played like a guy who understood that and relished that opportunity to go out and prove something tonight. And, he hasn't always done that. Like, he has had big games in the playoffs, but been a lot of times that he just looks a little overwhelmed. Like, he's thinking too much about that stuff. And, it almost it's similar to how Doc, people like to joke, you give him an undermanned team, all of a sudden he's Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, whoever you want to,
I
Greg
believe somebody
Popovich,
wrote an article about that.
whoever you want to compare him to. But James Harden now there wasn't real pressure on them in this game without Joel Embiid, and he came out and he took advantage of that, and all credit to him. That's the best game he has played for the Sixers, and I don't think it's even close.
Oh, I mean, considering the stage and the opponent, I don't think it's close at all. I mean, I'd have to go through all of his playoff games. I'm sure again, when he was with Houston, there was a lot of games, big games like this. But when you talk about a guy that has a reputation for coming up small in big moments, for not being great in the playoffs, this has to be one of his best playoff performances, considering the Sixers, the Celtics, the rivalry, the situation, no Embiid. Again, I'm sure he's had great games, but this is certainly has to be right up there with some of his best games without question. But the other thing outside of Harden too, we want to talk big picture. You had said it all year, and it's really what kept me motivated throughout this game. They just find ways to win. You tweeted this and you said they've played hard all year. Why would they stop now? And it's so true. Throughout the entire game, I'm checking the betting market, being like, they're minus 600, they're minus 400, they're minus the Celtics were minus 600, minus 400. The Celtics.
How much money did you win on this game? Because I feel
Well,
like the betting odds have coming up quite a bit already.
I wish I would have. I'm too afraid to bet in general on these things. But I'm checking it throughout the game and trying to say to myself, man, nobody thinks they're going to win this game. And that's really how it felt. But there were so many times throughout this game where a Horford would miss a three, or Tatum would miss a layup, or just little things where in past years, those things don't go their way. And I thought so many role players stepped up tonight. Melton, early on in the game, he didn't have as good of a second half, but early on when the defense was struggling and everyone's like, man, the Sixers defense has been terrible. And we'll talk about that in a second. But early on when the defense was struggling, Melton really, he would have 18 points, 16 points in the first half. He was unbelievable. Paul Reed hit big free throws. PJ Tucker got a big offensive rebounds. I mean, this was the night where what you've been saying all year in terms of they're a deeper team, they find ways to win games, all of that was on display tonight.
Paul Reed went 4 of 4 at the free throw line in the final 90 seconds of that game. Like, think about
unbelievable.
That is by far the biggest moment of Paul Reed's basketball life, right?
Yeah.
Never played in a game and been in that important of a game, even in the final 10 minutes of it, really. Like last year, he played in playoff games and second round games, but nobody was looking to him in a big moment, right? And so for Paul in that moment, he makes the first two that you keep the game within 1 point. Then you make the two clinching free throws that ensure, no matter what Boston does, even if Marcus Smart or whoever else hits a desperation three, it doesn't matter. The game's over. You've won the game. So Paul in that spot was great. And honestly, I thought his performance mirrored game 4 against Brooklyn, where I thought Paul was out of sorts in that first half.
Yeah.
Like they all were on defense, obviously. It's not all his fault. He's the young and experienced guy. But you can see the difference in rim protection between him and Joel Embiid, to put it lightly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he settles into that
player of the year argument for Embiid got some momentum tonight.
But he settles into that game, right? And he starts to make an impact on the boards. He scores a couple points early in the half, protects the rim, does some Paul Reed nitty-gritty type work. And that's why you have guys like that on the team. You're not always going to have a great scoring effort, right? Not every guy's going to have it going. Even Tyrese Maxey, who we talked about earlier in the podcast, he didn't have a great night, but he had enough moments and he had enough composure in the moments that mattered that he was able to say, look, I'm 8 for 21 at some point. He finishes 10 for 24 for the game. In the playoffs, the reason that people don't care that Kobe Bryant went 6 for 24 in a game 7 is because they won the game because he had a million rebounds in that game. And playoff basketball is not, oh, you're going to shoot 55% from the field. You're going to hit your season averages. It's you have to win by any means possible. And that's why I've all year with this team, because I've seen them win in so many ways with so
Mhm.
many different guys, you say, that's the stuff that translates to the playoffs. It's not Joel scoring 33 points a game. It's
Yep.
not James leading the league in assists. It's PJ beating 3 guys to an offensive rebound. It's somebody hitting a big shot after not touching the ball for 5 minutes. And game after game, week after week, month after month, they have built up these moments and built up this, this basketball character that they have as a group now. And they've talked about it. They've been confident in themselves. And now I think people are going to see this is a real series.
Yeah.
Even if Joel is not fully whole, they have the horses to run with these guys.
And we'll get into it a little bit, but then it raises interesting discussions about how hard do you push Joel for game 2. But before we get into briefly the Embiid stuff, the other Maxey thing I thought from tonight was I thought in some ways he was a bit of a poster child for the entire game, because there would be 2-3 possessions or 2-3 shots where he would miss. They were kind of reckless. I was getting frustrated with him for constantly taking that like fade away, leap over 3-pointer when it felt like he didn't have to do it. But then every time I was just about to turn on him or just about to say, man, get him out the game, he'd make a layup or he'd get a steal. I thought he was pretty good on the defensive end at the end. He was certainly at the beginning not great. But just a lot of like heads up moments. His and one obviously ended up being huge. It looked like it might get reversed. I thought it was the right call that they ended up sticking with. But a very underrated heads up play by him, where at the end of the game, the Celtics throw it away. The shot clock either just expired or was, 0.1 seconds from expiring. And everyone on the court stops, but he keeps going. And it would have been easy to pick that ball up, or, who knows what happens. Maybe they call a travel on him, or, it's their ball and they don't get that easy layup. So I thought there was a super heads up play by Maxey, who, again, young player, was not playing well. But I do respect the fact he kept shooting. He didn't get discouraged by himself. And at the end of the game, he was very much mentally there and made some big plays.
Do we want to talk about Doc Rivers a little bit as the foremost Doc Rivers podcast in Sixers world?
Well, let me say my group chat I'm in was not happy with Doc Rivers throughout the game, but we can get into him if you want now.
Look, I think he had some decisions that we'll look back and maybe question a little bit. Whether you play George Niang at all in this series is sort of the ongoing question for me. Playing small was problematic at times for these guys, but I thought every time that it felt like they needed a timeout to stabilize things, Doc calls the timeout. I know I always say timeouts are overrated, but
timeouts.
But a lot of stabilizing timeouts in that game. Never let the game get out of reach, even when Boston felt like they were going on runs. I thought he did a good job of managing the game in terms of mixing up coverages, and they played zone and they messed Boston up with zone, but I didn't think they sat in it too long. They didn't let Boston get really comfortable against it, and they mixed and matched there. They moved different guys around the zone. Jalen McDaniels doesn't play well in that game, so he didn't play a lot, but Doc sort of moved him around as a chess piece within that zone at times. So that's an interesting thing. And look, again, trusting a guy like Paul Reed. Paul Reed played 37 minutes in that game. Paul Reed struggled to beat out DeAndre Jordan, who is only in the NBA for vibes for the last 3 or 4 years now.
Did Montrezl Harrell even play?
No.
Was there any backup center? Dedmon didn't play either, did he? Yeah,
so it was only 8 guys.
Yeah. Wow.
Melton played 25 minutes, Niang played 13, McDaniels played 11. They played 8 guys, and that was all they had tonight. I was all honestly, the only other guy, 2 guys you might think about playing there, Shake Milton, but he wasn't helping the defense tonight, and the offense was good enough. And D House over Niang is an interesting one moving forward. But look, I think, again, it's proof of clearly Doc is, at the very least, Doc is able to instill the message in these guys that Joel being out is not an excuse for us to lose this game. We can point at the history and say the Sixers have not won a game 1 in round 2 for however many years. We can say historically they've been bad without Joel. We can say the Celtics have won 14 out of 21 playoff series against this franchise.
Don't kill the vibe tonight, Kyle. Keep it.
None of that shit matters. I don't care. I do not care what happens when Ben Simmons is on the team in 2018 and it's
Yeah.
Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova. I especially don't care what happened in the fucking bubble in Disney World in 2020 when Al Horford is on the Sixers and Josh Richardson and Tobias Harris are the other two main guys on the team. Like, that does not tell us anything about this team and
Yeah.
this matchup and this year. And so, as far as how this team is being handled by Doc, being set up by Daryl, and handled by the players, like everybody all year, it's never been, we're going to make excuses. We lost because of this, we lost because of that. It's, we got to improve ourselves. We're not blaming the refs. We're not saying we got like one schedule loss out of Doc's mouth, maybe in early in the year, maybe a second one. But
Right.
aside from that, no excuse making from this group, no pity parties. And that to me is what is on display in that game, is that
Yeah.
this group believes in themselves. And some of that is a credit to the coach.
So I think that this team does, like, we can get into a philosophical discussion about how much coaches matter and how much they impact things. But there's no question that coaches that people like get credited for the things that this Sixers team does. They make comebacks, they play really hard, they win when their star isn't there. So if you don't think coaches matter, fine. But ultimately, the things that great coaches do, this Sixers team does. But let me ask you this. What'd you think of the defense in the first half in terms of well, obviously it was bad, but being Doc's fault,
Horrendous. That's what
yes,
I
it was
think of
very
it.
bad.
Yeah.
But the defense in the first half, did you think that was Doc not playing zone enough? Like, why did you think they struggled? Because I do think a common criticism of Doc in this game will be the defense was really bad in the first half. So I'm curious how you, I know you haven't had a chance to rewatch it and it can be hard live, but curious where you fall on that in terms of a blame pie chart for Doc.
Well, listen, I'm never going to be the guy who says to play more zone because I absolutely hate watching it and I think it's for
Mhm.
cowards. But you can't argue that it helped change this game and that it certainly worked for them there. Look, I think some of it you can just see that this is a team that structurally is built around Joel Embiid, right? Like they
Yeah.
have a lot of guys, except for PJ, they have a lot of guys who are either iffy or bad defenders, and they're there to make life easier on offense for Joel. They space the floor, they do everything around Joel there, and Joel is their backstop. He's their savior on the back end. And look, I think Paul Reed is probably a better defensive player than people think in terms of on switches. Like I think tonight you could see
Yeah.
they freely switched him across perimeter players, and I thought he held up pretty well against
Yeah.
guards and wings for Boston. But when he gets put in those positions where it's a 2v1 and there's a guy coming down the lane, a driver like a Tatum, like a Brown, and he's got to play that middle ground where he shows something to a Tatum, but he doesn't stray far enough from, Horford or Robert Williams or whoever it is that they're going to get an open layup or dunk. That's what Joel is really good at. Number one, he's just bigger. So even if he's in the same spot, his wingspan, I'm waving my arm for
I
people who are
like it.
listening to this tomorrow.
Yeah.
His wingspan just makes it harder to get past him. And then if the pass gets past him, if the guy decides to drop it off, Joel's recovery speed and that length allows him to block guys at the rim that like Paul's never going to be able to block those guys. So
Yeah.
that's part of the problem is like Paul is just his strength as a defender is not in that cat and mouse middle ground, feel out the driver type of game. His strength is switching everything. And that requires, they have to rotate through, they have to, the guy who's the low man has to slide in and they just have to fly around the floor. And that's where the limitations of, James Harden as an off ball guy, Tyrese Maxey as a defender, all that stuff bubbles up. And then there's beyond that, their transition defense just sucked. Like Boston ran and ran and ran when they
Yeah.
got stops in that first half. Like Sixers offense was plenty good, but it felt like every single miss, Boston was just off to the races. Jaylen Brown got a bunch of easy ones. Tatum got some easy ones. Robert Williams gets some easy ones. And look, I think that I want to say Boston had 26 points in the paint in the
Yeah,
first quarter.
I would say it was something like 34-10 at one point in points in the paint.
Yeah, and I think 26 came in the first quarter
Yeah.
alone, which is just unfathomable. So, look, they're not going to be able to protect the rim the same way they will with Joel Embiid. Now, Joel's sitting and drop, and that style of defense against Boston and Al Horford has its own problems that come with it, but you are not going to have the type of layup line that Boston had tonight. But look, zone defense helped shift the tide and helped change that game. Paul Reed settling in and figuring out his place helped settle the game. Then they just, they played better in terms of getting up into guys' chests and things like that. But a lot of that stuff that I'm going to have to catch on the rewatch tonight.
So the other thing I think stood out is one of my concerns all year about the Celtics, but definitely, as the season went on and you saw the Celtics were winning, is I was a little worried that in the big moments, the Sixers wouldn't be the tougher team. They wouldn't be the one that, is diving for the loose ball or would get the rebound. And they did give up 2 really bad offensive rebounds. So I'm not completely, saying that they dominated in that regard. But this was a mentally tough win by the Sixers. And the Celtics are at home. Maybe they took them lightly. Who knows? But there were so many moments in this game where it felt like they could have, like past teams would have given up. And against a Celtics team that just went to the finals, that's playoff tested, that has won a lot of these type of games, I thought it was impressive that the Sixers match their intensity, if not beat it, in terms of just those big moments in the end and just coming through it and making big plays when it counts. I'm curious from your perspective, how much can this be something they build on? Because there's, probably no Embiid game 2. We can talk about it. But ultimately, you mentioned it a few minutes ago. This team doesn't often get momentum in the second round, right? They fall behind 2-0 to the Heat. They fell behind 1-0 to the Hawks. I don't remember in the Raptors series that they lost on the Kawhi shot, how that ended up going.
It was 1-1. They didn't play that well in game 1 of that series. And then Jimmy had an awesome game 2 and they won by I want to say 5 to 8 points, something like that. Close game, but
not a great start to that series either. I'm curious, as someone that's around the team all the time that knows them, does this feel like it can be the momentum builder heading into the rest of the series?
I mean, sure. I'll stick on Boston for a quick second. You brought up the mental side of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I've tried to stress to you and to our listeners is that Boston has a lot of the same problems that people think the Sixers have in terms of not taking competition seriously and, mental woes and things like that. And look, there are a lot of very good teams that go through that. Denver was a great example late in the season. They completely took their foot off the gas and they were bad. And honestly, I said this prior to the series. I don't think the Celtics have a coaching advantage in this series. I don't think Mazzulla is that good. He's not a guy who is a constant dabbler. He has some of the traits of a good coach. Certainly they're a top 5 team on both ends. And so he has set them up generally to be a very good team. But in terms of the moment to moment X's and O's, adjustments, lineup changes, things like that, I don't think he's shown this year that he's look, this is his first year as an NBA head coach. He's got to go through the reps in the playoffs, just like all the players do. When we talk about these guys haven't been in the big moments before. So that's a plot line that'll go for the rest of the series. In terms of
super quick on the coaching, because you said this a bunch, both on the pod and in text messages, that they do not really have a 5-man lineup that they can trust at the end of games that they've consistently used. One thing I do think stood out tonight, because the Sixers all year have had a very clear pecking order: Embiid, Harden, Maxey, right? And you saw it tonight, even with Embiid out. Harden was the guy, and then Maxey was the guy, and then Toby had an increased role. I do think watching the Celtics tonight, they don't have that. Sometimes it's Tatum, sometimes it's Brown. Marcus Smart was getting some shots up. So while they might have a deeper roster potentially, I think that the way the Sixers roster is structured helped them a lot in crunch time. And you could see why they are one of the better crunch time teams. Even if they don't have the talent per se that Boston has, they know what they're doing. They know who is where, right? Harden, Maxey, Toby. Harden, Maxey, Toby. That was clear tonight. And I didn't think it was as clear when the Celtics had the ball.
Well, I would say that the hierarchy is clear and Jason Tatum is the guy. The problem is that when Jason Tatum is in heat check, pull up, jumper mode, that a lot of times other teams or other guys on the team can get lost. And that's why throughout the regular season, it was so frustrating to watch the Sixers overhelp on his drives and, when he's having poor scoring nights, because what really makes Boston good is that all those guys can punish you if you leave them open, right? But if you're sending 2 guys at Tatum on the ball. He's a good enough playmaker. He'll find an open guy. Like he used to be I would say a below average playmaker. Now he's pretty good in the sense that you give him an opening, he'll hit it. So you got to try to make him beat man coverage. And, to his credit, he scores 39, has a really good game, but there are stretches that game where other guys aren't touching the ball. I think Jaylen Brown was on fire to start that game. He ended up taking 10 shots the entire game.
Wow.
That's their second best. That's their second best player.
Yeah,
like for him to go that whole game only taking 10 shots is crazy. And so that's a subplot to always keep in mind with them are the rest of the guys getting their touches, getting their shots, and what happens there. But back to your momentum point. I absolutely think this is something they can build on because look, whether Joel plays next game or not, now these guys are confident we can go into their house and beat them. We didn't even play a complete game. If you go down the roster, like Niang gave them nothing. McDaniels gives them nothing. They couldn't figure out how to play without Paul Reed on the floor.
Maxey was not that good, too. Like, he just wasn't that good overall.
Tyrese is up and down. Tobias is up and down. Like, that was not like a great game. They got an unbelievable individual game from Harden, but they can play a much better team game. So, look, Boston's going to come back down to earth in some ways, clearly, after that first half where they shoot 17 to 20.
Yeah.
They started 17 to 20 to start the game, and then I don't remember what they were shooting at halftime. Something.
Well, I actually
ridiculous.
wrote it down because I'm a big Sixers beat writer now. Celtics shot 71% from the field in the first half, 57% from three. And in the first quarter, it was 85% and 66%.
Yeah. So, look, man, yes, absolutely this can be a momentum builder. You win game one on the road. You now do not have to win a road game the rest of the series if you take care of business at home.
Wow, I didn't think about that. Good point.
I'm not expecting them to win every home game. Like I think Boston is a good enough team that you say they will more than likely win one in Philadelphia's house. But you have now taken the pressure off of yourselves in game two. Game two is found money. If you can win that game, you are in the absolute driver's seat for the series. If you don't, you still have home court. You take care of business at home. You go back to Boston for game 5 up 3-1, and you can potentially close it out, or you get another chance at home in game 6.
Yeah.
Those are the stakes.
Yeah. I mean, to your point too, like I didn't think about that. Now on Wednesday, when they play game 2, it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with Embiid in that game, because now I don't want to say it's found money because ultimately you don't take anything for granted, right? You just don't. But one thing too, when you talk about momentum with this team, early on in the year, we were doing this pod. It was, well, they're 0-3 against the Celtics. And man, they've lost so many games in a row. Now you can look at the last 3, clearly the most meaningful 3 games, and say they beat them in one of them. They beat them tonight. And the game they lost at home, Tatum hit a game-winning 3 at the buzzer, and they, played really well in that game. So a narrative that was this team can't beat the Celtics, this team really struggles against them, has now completely flipped. Like the Sixers are the team that are outplaying the Celtics. The Sixers are the team that if you're a Celtics fan or a Celtics reporter, whatever, you're leaving the stadium tonight or talking to the players and asking, maybe this is a tough matchup for them because they didn't have Embiid. They didn't get a great Tyrese game. And as I just said, and let's kind of end on this, they did not have Joel Embiid tonight, right? So I'm curious, for game 2, but also, do you have anything else about the game itself before we move to Joel?
No, we can move to Joel.
Okay. So Joel, obviously ruled out. We were texting before the game, us and producer James, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? I talked myself into the fact he was going to play. But in reality, a lot of the news over the last 24 hours has not been great, right? We now know it's more than a grade 1 sprain, right? It's in that 2, if not closer to that 3. He hasn't run yet. There was some reporting, and it'll be optimistic he would play in game 2. I'm curious where you're at with Joel. What are you hearing? And just since we've last recorded, and really all the news of the past 24 hours, how are you feeling about his injury?
I'm just going to say there are so many different people reporting stuff on Joel at this point that, and look at this, Joel's hoodie was crucial to tonight's victory. Shout out JG3. That's
At first, I was like, what in the world is going up on our screen? But yes, Joel, there was a moment where he ran off the bench today, and I was like, yo, get back on the bench. Because
It was when it's when PJ
PJ hit
accidentally
him.
ball tapped Jason Tatum. And
Yeah.
I had somebody in my Twitter mentions, by the way, who was like, accidental? No way. LOL. It's like, bro, he's
Well,
screaming at somebody on like his teammates and just like threw his arm
yes.
back. That's
It was
clearly accidental.
definitely accidental, but I will say he does swing his arm back. So it's a purposeful swing. He just doesn't see that that Tatum's coming down the line. But anyway, back to Joel.
So anyway, I mean, Skip Bayless is reporting
I
stuff
know.
on Joel. Like, come on, man. I'm not even going to try to pretend if I know that he's going to play or the exact state of his knee. Here's what I would say. The phrase found money has come up multiple times. Where I don't think it's found money is you don't get cute and say, well, we're going to try to save him. If he is ready to play and he says, I'm going to play, he comes back and plays, because we can all sit here and say Sixers are on the victory tour right now and all that stuff. James Harden's probably not going to give you 45 again
No,
in
I don't
game
think
2.
so.
Like, and that's not disrespecting Harden, but that is like an all-time Sixers playoff performance right there. I'm not expecting that in game 2.
Yep.
To beat them in game 2, you're more than likely going to need more from the other guys. And frankly, to have your best player available to shoulder the load, to beat up on Al Horford in a different way for the second straight game. So if he's ready to go, I am not in any sort of frame of mind to say you rest him and you bring him back for game 3. Because honestly, another important thing is you get some game reps for him. You run him out there and you say,
it's true.
All right, he's got his conditioning back a little bit. And I know, I believe Brian Windhorst was on the broadcast or on Sports Center earlier, right after the Embiid news came out. And he said part of the reason Joel went through a workout today, or like a relatively intense workout, is because they want to see how he feels on Tuesday or tomorrow, as we're talking right now. And so if he plays in game 2 and then feels awful between game 2 and game 3 and is essentially not able to play anymore, if you saved him for game 3 and then he feels that on Saturday and you go down 2-1 because you got cute and you thought, oh, it was, found money, whatever, you get him back as soon as he's able and willing to go, period. Now, I don't know when that is. I don't know if they'll agree with that philosophy, but to me, that is about as easy a decision as it gets.
So I think I agree with you. Here would be my pushback is going into tonight's game. I was very much in the camp of, dude, you got to play. You got to push it. This year has to be different. If it's 50-50, and you had said this too, this is where it's worth taking that risk to make sure that you play, right? My only counter now after watching tonight, and you're right, don't get overly cute, don't get overly confident, is this team can beat the Celtics. Like, they can beat them. They're up 1-0. And so while I agree you don't get cute and you don't sit Embiid because of the logic that you're up 1-0, man, if Embiid, if I'm hearing and the doctors are telling me that if Embiid sits another 3 days, there can actually be a noticeable difference, I might do it, because ultimately this team is good enough. We saw tonight this team is different. And while they might be able to go up 1-0 on the Celtics, they're probably not beating the Celtics without Embiid. Although after tonight, who knows? But they're probably, or definitely not winning the NBA Finals without him. So while I think that there is a lot of truth in what you're saying, the win tonight does make me feel, man, if when Embiid comes back, he can be 20% better if by sitting out game 2, 20, 25, whatever. It's tempting. I'm not going to lie. It's tempting because this team knows how to win. And if you can get Joel back at 60%, 70% instead of 30%, that could be the difference between winning the NBA Finals and not.
Get him back as soon as possible.
Right, there it is.
That's just, I don't have any more to say on the subject other than that. That's
all right. Well, let me make my last Embiid point and then we'll wrap this up because I want to get it to the people and I want to go celebrate on Twitter. So the win tonight, and, remind me if I said this at the beginning when the adrenaline was really pumping, but the win tonight, I thought for Embiid was a massive win because we talk so much about Joel's mental state. Where is he at? How is he feeling? In the game, is he into it? In between games, how is he feeling? What's his attitude about everything going on? And the quote I always think about is when Tatum made that game-winning 3 and he said, story of my life, right? I thought tonight, could be a moment where Joel could really look at himself and say, this might be different. So often when he's out, they lose. They fall behind 2-0. They don't play well. And immediately when he comes back, it's that, well, we're down 2-0. Like, I have to be great right away. This is such a tough situation we're already in. If I'm Joel, and I think you saw it actually on his face throughout the game in the first half, granted it's the first half, but he's subdued on the bench. He's just kind of hanging out. As the game goes on and he sensed like, oh my God, we might win this thing. He's up. He's, there's people, they show on the broadcast, he's talking to Harden, who's about to sub in. Like, he was involved. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think them winning this game tonight for Joel is a massive moment, because now he can sit here and go, oh my God, this injury I'm dealing with, that understandably would be mentally very taxing on him, right? Here we go again. I'm hurt again. This is what I've been waiting for. There was a chance he could have got the MVP on Tuesday, coming off of the Sixers losing a game where he didn't play, and that's dominating the narrative, right? And it's ruining his moment. Now Joel can wake up tomorrow morning and be excited to get the MVP, to get excited about coming back. And I always say it, I'm an emotional guy, so I can sympathize with him. I think this is a really big morale boost for him moving forward, of knowing not only when he comes back, will they either be, 1-1 or whatever, but he can feel like they can win the series. So I thought for Joel's perspective, this was a massive win tonight.
A couple things. One, ESPN stats and info. Great stat here I'm going to throw at you.
All right.
PJ Tucker just played the most minutes in the shot clock era without a single field goal or free throw attempt.
Wow, that's very PJ. I'm happy he has that record.
That is maybe the most PJ Tucker performance in the history of basketball.
Ben or PJ, yeah.
Number two, I agree with you, because if you think about what would have happened, or what sort of podcast this would have been had they lost that game, we would be sitting here and saying, look, they got the vintage Harden game. They did all this, they did all that, and they still come up short. They just can't beat this team. The Celtics they're the boogie team. They always find a way to win. Doesn't have to be pretty. They can withstand the Harden barrage, whatever. And instead, we're saying the Sixers stole home court. Joel didn't have to play. And now Joel might come back just a little bit healthier, with a little bit better spirits, and with a much better chance to win this series without even having to win another road game the rest of the way.
Yeah, 100%. I was not in the camp of, had they lost tonight, I was not going to come on and go, well, it was close and Harden was great and that's encouraging. It was man, they blew it. Like, they blew it had they lost that game. But Kyle, they didn't lose the game. They won the game. So we will now have a Game 2 pod to look forward to. Maybe another win, but at the very least, a day that started off with such kind of disappointment about Joel and such fear for this series. Sixers fans should wake up Tuesday morning, obviously listen to the pod, but feel really excited about this, and that this season can be different. And this could be the start of a ride that we all hoped we would go on, but didn't feel like was possible. And after tonight, is certainly possible. So we will be back. And I want to, before I wrap this up, there's people in the comment section. I want to thank everybody that is listening right now. I want to thank everybody that sat through and watched me look all disheveled with my hair all messed up, with Kyle.
No slicked hair, man. What's happening?
So this is the problem. When you always slick your hair back, the time you don't do it, you look extra disheveled. Everyone's like, what are you going through? I'm out of hairspray right now. I have to go buy some tomorrow morning. It's very upsetting, but it's all right. It's all right. Now that they won, I'll be excited to get up and get it in the morning. So, but as I said, thank you to everybody that's listening. Very much appreciate it. And I also want to say thank you for watching. You can find us, as I said, everywhere you get podcast apps. But the number one place is the free Odyssey app. You can download the app. You can turn on the auto download feature, so that as soon as these come out, they're right in your Odyssey app and they're right there so that you can listen to it about all these exciting wins. So get the Odyssey app, keep watching, clap your hands. Very much appreciated. And Kyle, I'll talk to you next time.
Talk to you guys soon.